I think that right now what we're seeing is a move into the safe haven of gold primarily. And it's not the trade war. Does that have something to do with it? Yes, it may. But primarily it's that more people, especially on the institutional side, believe it or not, are saying, you know what, this is not going well. What isn't going well? The economic contraction of the global economy. That's what's not going well. The markets have recognized that fact at some level, and the institutions are moving into gold.
SDBullion.com is a high-volume physical gold, silver, and precious metal dealer. We are committed to being your trusted source for low-cost, highest quality investment-grade bullion products. Visit SDBullion.com for more information.
Welcome to another Silver Doctors exclusive. Today I'm excited to have returning guest, Silver Guru himself, Mr. David Morgan. He's the creator of the Morgan Report, and he's a frequent contributor here on Silver Doctors. So looking forward to getting his thoughts on the recent price action movement in the metals, as his thoughts on the future of metals and everything else. So welcome, Dave, back to Silver Doctors.
Mike, thanks for having me back. It's great to be with you.
Well, I appreciate you taking time for us, and definitely I want to get into silver because that's what I'm sure everyone wants to hear about most. But before we get into that, I'm curious to find out, some things that might concern you with the markets. And so we had the G7 this past weekend. We got all the situation out east. Are there anything that really has you concerned?
Well, Mike, I'm really not sure how to answer that. I mean, anyone that's listened to me from, 1999 onward knows I've been concerned about the fact that all fiat currencies eventually fail and that this is a global problem and all that. And I don't think I need to really repeat it, but certainly I'm concerned about that. I think that right now what we're seeing is a move into the safe haven of gold primarily. And it's not the trade war. Does that have something to do with it? Yes, it may. But primarily it's that more people, especially on the institutional side, believe it or not, are saying, you know what, this is not going well. What isn't going well? The economic contraction of the global economy. That's what's not going well. China's in big trouble. They caught the United States Keynesian disease years ago, overbuilt, used a lot of misallocation of capital, built stuff, these ghost cities and a lot of things. And I'm not trying to pick on China because we've done it. Basically, everybody's done it. So we have this fiat system that concerns me. I think I probably said enough, but let me just make one more point I'm trying to make. The markets have recognized that fact at some level, and the institutions are moving into gold.
Right. So we see the fact that, along with the currencies, the representations of those currencies happens to be the bond market. And so the negative yielding debt continues to increase. And so in your opinion, how much longer can that debt basically turn into more junk status than anything else before something has to give in the financial markets, which will unfortunately reflect in more of the metals prices?
Well, Mike, I've gotten a little better over the years because I've been picked on so much. I shouldn't say picked on. I sound like a victim mentality, and I'm far from that. But, I make calls to the best of my ability, and, with a manipulated market, which might be an excuse, it's a little tough. So I've gotten pretty good about not giving a time on anything, but I'm going to answer your question. So I was in London. I have an affiliate program in London that basically does options trading on the SLV and the GLD, and I'm all in favor of it if and only if you've established a physical position first. But that's, beside the point. The point is this. When I was in London, I interviewed with the gentleman that produced the Four Horsemen film that I was honored to be in, along with several other well-known thinkers. Mm-hmm. And he asked me that same question, and that was a year ago. And I still believe this is the correct answer. I could be proven wrong, but I don't think we have 5 years, and that was a year ago. So I think 4 years. Now, does that mean everything burns to the ground? Does that mean shipping stops? Does that mean no communications? Does that mean the grid's down? No, it means none of those things. What it means is that we have enough trouble, as you stated, Mike, in the bond market, where there's some serious misallocations that are corrected, where it could be in the U.S. debt markets, where it should, be corrected at some point in time. So that's a pretty bold call to say we've got like basically 4 more years before something's got to give. But I truly believe that we push this thing so far for so long and lied to ourselves for so many times on so many things that sooner or later, as the old expression, the truth will out. The truth comes out. You can't live the lie of printing wealth. It doesn't work. So that's what I think. I think we've got about 4 years.
4 years. Now, along with those 4 years, I'm curious to find out your thoughts and opinions on the back and forth, or the one direction that our current president has towards his looks like dislike towards the Federal Reserve policy, and the fact that he mentions that we're behind while everyone else drops. And so in that 4 years, we got a presidential election coming up within that same time frame. So we'll either have the same president or someone new. Now, will that matter at all, or it's inevitable that if this thing has to come to an end or adjustment or reboot or whatever? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll give you 2 thoughts. One, I was asked basically the question about, Trump well before the election. I was in Canada doing an interview, and this woman asked, what do you think about Trump, or if he is elected, what would that mean? And the answer at that time was, it really doesn't matter if Trump's elected or not, because it's basically putting someone on the Titanic. With Trump in office, you'll probably see more employment. You'll probably see a livelier tune played by the band. You might get more luxury chairs. And I think you'll get a feel-good atmosphere, but the ship's going down. Now, having said that, I want to add on to that. I don't know really what Trump thinks about the Fed, but it's very interesting. And I've talked to, and I hope you don't mind me talking about other websites, but I've interviewed with Dave of X22 a few times, and I had him on my podcast. I'm pretty picky, regardless. And, with Andrew Jackson on the wall in the Oval Office, and the way he bashes the Fed over and over again, Dave is of the belief, and I'm open-minded enough to think that there could be, I'm not saying would be, but could possibly be a situation where we get rid of the illegal Fed. I mean, the Fed was done basically at Christmas time in 1912 and signed into law in 1913, and it's unconstitutional. So if we let these European bankers run the United States monetary system, which they have for over 100 years, and let's just hypothetically say that Trump's got enough protection to take the bankers on like Andrew Jackson and not end up with a lot of soil above him, it's possible. And so am I saying that's going to happen? No. But is it possible? Yes. So the long-winded answer is, look, if someone came in and reestablished where the Treasury was responsible for creating the credit in the country, especially without interest, and we paid our own way internally where the United States was sovereign with its debt and it wasn't controlled by basically Europeans that run the Fed. I know the member banks are, and the commercial banks are part of the Fed, and they've kind of watered it down. But the truth of the matter is it started primarily without many Americans even on the Fed or in the Fed that own the private shares of it. But anyway, back on point. If you came in, got the Treasury involved, got rid of the Fed, started manufacturing the United States note like John F. Kennedy did before he was assassinated, we could see a big change. Now, Mr. David Morgan, what are you really saying? The saying is, look, it could happen. Is it going to happen? I don't know. Would it be beneficial? Yes. Would it be painful? Absolutely. And of course, the last thing the bankers hardly ever do is lose. But it is, I don't know, a remote possibility. So long answer. So the early answer was, doesn't matter who's in the ship's the Titanic, it's going down. But if that captain grabs a hold of it and they repair that boat and they take over who's controlling it, it could make a difference.
Yeah, I do agree. It could make a difference. And that particular viewpoint is very optimistic. And so I appreciate that. And so my only question will then be, that's just one ship. Yeah. And so that's the Titanic. It so happens to be the reserve currency Titanic. But yet, when you hear about the China, I heard just recently the cryptocurrency is being rolled out. They got 5 corporations that's looking to be issued that particular currency first. So we can make those plans here. But what about our partners and allies and enemies and all the things that the other nations? Because according to history, when empires end, it usually doesn't end pretty. And then what comes next usually, disrupts everything before. So, what about the opposite? of that equation as well.
Yeah. Now, Mike, I like your thinking. I like your title, Rethinking the Dollar. Yeah, I mean, look, it's pretty obvious what the powers that be, the elite, the top tier banking system people, they want a cashless society and everything's traced, tracked, and taxed. And that means crypto fits perfectly with that because everything goes on the ledger and it can be recalled for forever, basically. So certainly I think there's a push that way, especially for centralization, where central control, because a lot of the Bitcoin / alternative cryptocurrency people say it's anonymous, and and some of them are. I know that. But look, again, I repeat, the bankers seldom lose. So that's an excellent point. That's the direction we're definitely heading. My little detour, you might say, on the Treasury taking over the printing of the money rather than a private corporation is maybe more wishful thinking than reality. So I would say, Mike, what I really think as far as where are we going, we're probably going down that path where either they let it control the collapse and maintain their ability to maintain their ability to control the currency. It just takes a different form where it's some type of cryptocurrency, or in the very unlikely scenario where the whole thing breaks apart and we start seeing everything come closer to home, which would mean nation states with their true independent national currency with no premier reserve currency. But as Jim Richards has said, and I think Jim's one of the better thinkers out there, and I say that often, I don't know him real well, but we've crossed paths and talked a few times briefly. But, they'll push for the SDR probably. And of course, what's the SDR? Well, it's a basket of currencies is what it is. And it's just got a fancy title on it. So, Mike, I really don't know. I mean, my feelings. I'm not exactly a libertarian, but I'm for, freedom. I'm for people being able to determine their own destiny. I hate the invasion of privacy. I got nothing to hide, really, at my age and stuff. I've got a past that I've done stuff I'm ashamed of, but who doesn't?
Yeah.
The point I'm making is just to be able to be left alone. And, just the thought of going, I'm sorry, I'm digressing. Just the thought of going grocery shopping and they're filming everything that you do and every apple you pick up. And I mean, it's just ridiculous, but that's what we've become.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's sad because it looks like what's happening out in Hong Kong is an indication of what people, they no longer want to be monitored, tracked, surveilled, all that stuff like that. Because I'm assuming, you've seen pictures of people covering their eyes up and they're cutting down facial recognition cameras. And I just saw recently about the possible declaration of martial law over there. Now, so any moment now, there could be some type of event that could literally bring everything to a halt or freeze or collapse or correction. Now, I want to get into metals. And so just recently, last couple of weeks, especially in the mainstream news, metals have been getting more attention now. And around us, every other country has already had all-time highs, but yet we haven't experienced it just yet here. Now, what's the trigger outside the country? And then will those same events cause a major spike here in this country?
On the metals?
Yes.
Yeah, boy, that's a tough question. I really don't know. What you asked me to, look in the future and say this event will move it. But I can tell you that there's a couple scenarios, and I'll speak in a general way. One is, as you've already mentioned several times, and you're spot on, that's the debt markets. I mean, somebody in China says, you know what, I hate this trade war. We'll show Trump who's boss. We've got, this X amount of treasury. We're going to dump them all on the market right now at the market, which means the clearing, even with the algorithms, the clearing will just go down, 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 because the market order will go and take every market order that's out there. And of course, the algorithm will see the thing falling, and away we go. So that's a scenario. The other one would be the opposite of it, or maybe both at the same time, where China says, we've got all this paper gold right now. We want it turned into physical, ship it yesterday. We want it, ASAP, and or add on to their position that's rather substantial already. So it could be, and it could be a number of other things, but those would be the two most likely to me. Some disruption in the physical gold market that's recognized on a nation state or a very large basis, and or a debt market mini crisis that unravels and actually builds momentum like a snowball going downhill. I mean, if the Chinese started off in the bond market in the taking the treasury market down. Yields would automatically start to spike up, and you would see probably some some followers. In other words, someone else with a substantial amount of U.S. debt would see what's going on in the market. They'd get a flash on their computer screen and say, "Oh my goodness, I don't know what China's doing, but they know something I don't. But I know I got to sell," and that kind of thing feeds on itself. So those are two. I think those are worthwhile answers to at least think about.
Now, in regards to silver, let's get to silver. Your silver guru. Recent activity, last couple of days, not a little less than $1, but yet it's significant enough to get a lot of people's attention.
Sure.
What are some things that, has possibly triggered that, or what have you heard about, from the silver market, or what was the reason for all that? Shine some light on for us.
Yeah, great. I wish I had absolute solid answers for you, Mike. I don't. I just did an update for my subscribers, my paid people last night, and I was surprised when it flew up the street. First of all, let me just preface with this. The last time gold was in this range, silver was at like $25, and we're sitting here at 18. So silver certainly lagging. It's gone from a gold-silver ratio of 95 to about 85, which shows you silver is outperforming gold right now somewhat. But, an 85 ratio is still way too high in my view. So when I did this update for the Morgan Report members, I was a little surprised to see that we actually have cleared almost all of the congestion from 2017 onward. So almost from, October, November 2017 onward. Back in July of 2016, we were at $21 silver. So when you break through that much resistance, about almost a year's worth in one fell swoop, that's pretty impressive. However, I also know how these algos run and how these bullion bankers are. So I've said this, and I'll repeat, and I hope I'm wrong. Normally, when you break through that much resistance, it gets pushed back down into that resistance level. If the market's strong, it pops up through it again. And then it gets pushed down again, it pops up through it again, and it's on its way, or usually it's the fourth time. So I actually expect to see silver push back down into that traded range for 1, 2, or 3 more times. But the volume that we went through it on was significantly, noticeably higher. Not like, oh my goodness, it's such a big amount of volume. There's nothing that's going to stop it now. Not that kind of volume, but very decent volume. So I really want to see silver get down to the 80-to-1 gold silver ratio. Sorry if I'm looking over to the other screen to look at my charts while I'm talking.
No problem.
I really want to see, the 80-to-1 ratio. And once I get to the 70-to-1 ratio, which is still too high, but, from 95-to-1 to 70-to-1 is quite a move in silver's favor relative to how poor it's performed relative to gold over the last several months higher. Is it going to happen this year? If you would ask me that a month ago, I probably said, I'm not so sure. Right now, I'm not positive. Another prediction, folks. I could be wrong, so I hate doing the time thing. But, we're sitting here in August right now, and I haven't seen the market trade like this in a long time. So is 20 possible? Yeah, it's possible. Is it going to happen? I don't know. There isn't a lot of resistance up to 2021 once you break through the level we just broke through, which is good. There's the overhead resistance doesn't really start until you're at, 1950 or something like that. So.
Yeah, I think that, just my opinion is that with all the turmoil and chaos around us and all-time highs that's being set in other currencies, it's going to be very hard to keep it well below 20 in the Federal Reserve currency itself. So I think just from outside pressures, eventually something's going to give, and when it snaps, and a hell will break loose, and it's going to go back to where it should go. But my question for you, you mentioned that seeing some good volume. So who's acquiring these metals? Who's acquiring?
Yeah, it's the institutions. It's unbelievable. I mean, as I said earlier in our discussion here, most of the money is coming into the ETFs and into the big money. The retail market is actually pretty poor right now, meaning the spreads between the bid and ask on, silver eagles or silver rounds or silver bars or at gold as well is pretty minimal. The spreads are tight, and they're that tight because there's a lot of product out there in the retail side that isn't moving. The reason it isn't moving is some people are selling their gold, finally made it back into 1500. I bought it 6 years ago at this price. They tell their wife, hey, Martha, we didn't lose any money on gold. I bought it at 15 and we got 15.25 for it or whatever. So there is some of that going on. And so it's interesting, but that's where it's coming from. It's a lot of paper trading and a lot of ETF movement and all that. I'll take the market at wherever it comes. I mean, the gold coins, gold bar, 400-ounce gold bar, whatever it is, never stops and asks the question, why did you buy me? It does. It's bought because, and there's a myriad of reasons. But as I said, if I'm going to put my neck out, it's because of the financial systems breaking down, and these people that are at the point of the spear know it, and they're moving into gold because they know what happens.
Yeah. Now you referenced, just the premium above spot price. Now, right now it's relatively small, but when stuff breaks and stuff really hits the fan, I haven't really been in the metals that long. I'm late to the party as far as being awakened to the reality of our monetary system. So I never witnessed, extremely high premiums. And so when things break, what are some possible premiums that we could see on the retail side when people actually decide to rush?
Yeah, well, great question. And thanks for your honesty. I think you really do great to interview. And again, you do rethink, you do think, and I love people with intellect. So anyway, back on the point. Yeah, in the 2008 financial crisis, everyone thought, whatever they thought. The reality is that silver was at around the $9 level on the paper markets, the futures exchanges, but it was like 30% higher in the retail side. No one, Andy Scheckman, I don't think Andy will mind me saying, I know you work with silver doctors, but, the fact is a fact. Andy called me up and asked if I could help him. And I said, help you what? He says, find some silver. And I said, I maybe can. And there was an industrial producer that was doing industrial silver, which is wire and mesh and pellets and all the stuff that's used for the industrial side of silver. So I actually got them to consider making 100-ounce bars, which they'd never done. They'd never done a retail product. Of course, the retail side marks up higher than what the commercial, stuff does. So they started making 100-ounce bars. So Andy was able to source metal when hardly anyone else could. So there was a time when the premiums went about 30% on silver. And, I don't know if this will happen or not. And I am biased and pretty optimistic on the future of the metals markets, the precious metals markets. But there could be, not would be, but could be a situation where we see something like that again. And it could even go further, where it's either, as Greg Hunter says, I'll give Greg credit because he's the one who started it, you either have it or you don't. I mean, when things, if it gets to the point where the psychology changes, where people view silver for its most biggest and important use, which is money, not, a product in your cell phone, and there's a rush into it. I want to digress a little bit further. I just did an update lecture interview, and I explained that 0.02% of the world's wealth is represented by silver. And people didn't understand what I was saying, so try to make it clear here. If you take 0.02 and you multiply it by 50, that equals 1. So that's how you get 1%. Now, right now, about 1% of the world's wealth is in gold right now, but only 0.02. So my point is, 50 times 0.02 equals 1. That's a fact. Don't argue about that or show your ignorance. Now, so some people didn't even get that part of it. The other part of it is I'm not saying that you could buy 50 times the amount of silver that's already owned at that price. Are you kidding me? What I'm suggesting is if you ever got on par with the amount of people that own silver for the same reason they own gold, because it's a safe haven money asset, that it would be a substantial increase in price, because if there was a demand of 50 times what it is now, and it equaled gold being 1% of the world's wealth represented in silver, equal to the 1% in gold right now. Can you imagine what the price would be? So all I'm suggesting is that silver has a multitude of uses, but its higher and best use is money. And the reason we know that for a fact is when gold and silver were money and nothing but, in the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th centuries, 4,000 years, they traded at the natural ratio, which is 12 to 1, 16 to 1. Everyone that says that's wrong. There's a 16 to 1 mine that had ratio close to that, but the natural ratio is 12 to 1 or less. And the reason it's only about 9 to 1 now is most silver is deposited near the Earth's surface. So like the oil market, all the easy to get to silver's been taken, just like in the oil situation. So there's a lot to consider what could happen with silver because it was perceived as money, and it adhered to the natural ratio because that's all it was. So its use was money and gold's use was money, and that's all they were used for. They adhered to the natural ratio, 12 to 1. When silver got adjusted, then Sir Isaac Newton pegged it about 15.5 to 1, I believe. So that's where your 16 to 1 comes from. That's an established ratio, not in the earth ratio. So there's a lot of people in the silver world that get that wrong. That kind of bugs me because it shows me how much they've studied the silver market. But then again, it's sort of my passion, as we all know. Yeah. So I think I answered your question, but honestly, if you got into silver below 20, if this market does half as well as I think it's going to, you're going to look like a genius in 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Well, David Morgan, as always, it was great to speak with you to get your insights on what's going on, what silver is happening in the silver world. So I appreciate you joining us on Silver Doctors here. Any last thoughts you want to leave us with as well? I'll put all the information. People know where to find you at, but I'll put it down below just because. Any last thoughts you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I think I do. I think the best thing to do if you want, everything for free, which a lot of people do, and that's fine. I get it. Follow me on Twitter. Most of that stuff comes, two of my staff have access to my Twitter account, but they seldom post. Almost everything on there is for me. And the reason I post on there, I do a little advertising. I mean, I've got to make a living, but a lot of it has to do with the economic stories that are so important for everybody to know. And I put those up on there. So you don't have to read everything I write or anything like that. Just check it once in a while and, oh my goodness. And the YouTube channel as well. Once in a while, there was a great repost that I did with Carl Bass interviewing, doing an interview, and it was just really pertinent with Steve Bannon on the China situation. And he dug deep, and it was very enlightening. And I think anyone that really wants to know what's really going on with China and what this trade war thing is really all about, you don't have to be on my channel, but just find an interview with Carl Bass, and he will become much more enlightened about what's really happening. So remember, fiat fails, but that doesn't mean everything drops to zero or stops moving. But it will be a challenge. And I'm up for it. You're up for it. Silver Doctors is up for it. So we can keep smiling. Mike, thanks for having me on here.